Hi, guys. I'm so happy to be together again. We've actually been together all day, which has been lovely. But this is the first minute that we've gotten to have our technology work and not be in a work meeting. And we're super excited to record again. So, welcome, John Waltz. If you want to find him, you can find him at johnwalt.com. He has this awesome series called Notes on Wisdom. Amory Bailey and I'm Cayce Harris. We work together at One, and you can find us at theonejourney.com. There's lots of different ways to interact with us, but you'll hear more about that at the end of the program. Today, we really want to talk about something that has been central to absolutely everything we do at One. It's the central differentiator of the One Journey, and it's connection with God in a way that's two-way. So I'm excited to really explore this. This will likely be more than just one podcast, but the language I'm going to use is hearing God. But what I just said about two-way connection with God, I really mean, and I know, and we all know, we'll talk about this. There's so many ways God speaks. There's so many ways that we experience messages, for lack of a better word, from God, and they aren't always verbal. They don't always have words. There's so much that's said in the unsaid. There's so much that's said in silence, in rest, in nature, through beauty, through relationships. So today we really want to go after the conversation of how do you engage in two-way conversation with God in the context of a much broader thing, which is connection with God, that I believe you can never escape connection with God. So it's really about discovering it. And the specific way we do help people discover things on the One Journey is through a verbal dialogue back and forth with God, two-way communication. Just like if I said to John, hey, John, what'd you have for dinner last night? What did you have, John?
I
Did
don't
you
know,
eat
some sort
dinner?
of Greek chicken, something.
Okay, perfect. If I ask him a question, because he's proximal to me, and this is through technology only that he's proximal to me, he can answer me really quickly, but he's capable of communicating. And the same is true of God. God's constantly present. If there's anything throughout the beginning of people trying to talk about God and who God is and how we relate to God, to the end, from beginning of the Bible to the end, to almost all world religions even, it's this constant of the presence. But in Christianity, it from beginning to end, and especially in Jesus Christ, the key message is that God is with us. Specifically, the Emmanuel God, that God came and became a human to model in so many ways that he's with us, even through the worst of it, through death, through destruction, through killing, through turmoil, through pain, and then showing us even that on the other side of the grave, he's there. He comes and shows up to people for 40 days and then says, it's even when I go, I'm not really going because my spirit is going to come and fill you. And that's going to actually be better for you. I know it's hard for you to understand, but it's really going to be better because then everybody everywhere is filled with my spirit. And the whole earth can actually be aware that my presence is near. So we have really good theological footing if we wanted to use it to just say, the presence of God is always near, and that's why we would practice two-way communication with God. And again, I'm going to use the words hearing God, but I really am going to belabor the point that I don't want you to be limited by the word hearing. And I don't want you to be limited by your concept of God. Because hearing God is something that we discover, that we were created, and that we were created by an entity that's loving and good and present, and we can engage in all kinds of ways with that loving, life-giving entity. So I know that I was born into a family where we called that entity God because we need to use words to put on it. But if somebody else used a different word for the same presence, creator, love, shepherd, rock, river, if we're using similes or metaphors to describe this concept of God, which people have throughout history, that's what we're talking about. And sometimes we let the words we've chosen to use get in the way of actually going, do I have access? Can I be actually in relationship? Or is it just this some nebulous, voice in the sky? Or a lot of people's conception of God is like Santa Claus, Well, that may be one representation, but it's a man-made, piece of it. Some other people's representation of God may be, well, I think of God as like the ocean, or I just think of God as love, or I think of God like the air that I breathe. This concept of God is so big that there's going to be endless metaphors that we can use that are accurate. And so the thing that we've discovered in doing 20 years of helping people actually hear God's voice is that this very large concept of a creator who loves us and is relational that Jesus puts on full display and really tells us about is accessible and will use the language that makes sense to you to communicate about who God is, who you are, the world, and to help us navigate life. And it's a complete game changer to enter into the world of you can hear God for yourself. It's also a little daunting because one, we haven't been taught how. Two, sometimes we've gotten some people down certain paths have taken that to a really unhealthy extreme. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm very excited about this topic. We talk about it all the time. So I won't normally do a 6-minute intro, but I want to give the context of let's have the conversation, Anne-Marie and John, I want to do a full spectrum on this conversation. Where does hearing God lead us astray, the concept? How have we seen it go wrong? How have we experienced it in a way that has impacted us? Has it impacted you? How do you experience hearing God? I want to really look at all the different ins and outs of it. And then I also want to do our most practical and basic teaching on hearing God because it's a huge center point of this podcast. We're going to be talking about hearing God. We're going to lead you through exercises of hearing God. But if the concept's new for you, I really don't want you to be stuck on it has to sound like a voice that's coming from outside. So let's start with your journey. And I want to ask Anne-Marie first, knowing that you've continued as you've grown to grow in your connection with God and your communication practices with God, can you just talk a little bit about your journey of learning to hear God's voice?
Yeah, I think the first thing I want to talk about is that accessibility piece, and how important. I think sometimes there's some misunderstanding about I need to call God by the right name or the thing. And I didn't really know God personally when I first said, God, I need you to show yourself to me. I'd grown up in the church, in the Episcopal Church specifically. And so my concept of God was around, well, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, because that's what I've been taught. But I didn't at the time have this conscious awareness that I know who God is. This is who I believe God to be. I was in a desperate place in my life, and I knew that I needed a power greater than myself. And I knew that as God. And so I just said, I was like, God, I need you to show yourself to me. Well, the importance of using a word that for someone is accessible for them, that's what opens up the space in them where they're able to receive and see and actually connect with God. So I think that's why you emphasize the idea, choose language that is accessible and comfortable for you, because that's the space where you're actually going to experience it. Because what I learned is that God wants to be accessible. He wants to show himself to us. And that's what I experienced. And what's interesting was the first time when I asked God to show himself to me, it wasn't in words that he showed himself to me. It was a knowing. It was an absolute knowing. And it actually makes me emotional every single time, because I so immediately, when I prayed that prayer, it's like I knew the fullness of God, the one who is greater than myself, who I so desperately needed. And I felt so powerless. He was fully present. in all that he was. And I couldn't have even articulated that. I can articulate it now. At the time, I just knew that he was there and he was accessible to me. And so one of the other things that I realized at the time was that I was in a 12-step program, and there was a practice inherent to that 12-step program that helped me talk to God. It helped me ask God questions. It helped me.
What was the practice?
The practice being, okay, step 1, I realize that I'm powerless. And step 2, step 3, I turn my life over to the power of God, to God as I understand him to be. So there were things that I knew, okay, I really realize I'm powerless now. So I'm surrendering. And now I'm going to turn my life over today, right now, in this minute, to this power that's greater than myself, to God. And then I'm not even going to get the steps completely right, because I haven't looked at them technically in such a long time. I've just actually practiced them. I turn my life over. Then I take a fearless moral inventory, and I ask for forgiveness, and I forgive people, and I take you know what I mean? It's those kinds of things. So that really was the practice of going through those 12 steps that gave me a way to engage with God. And I was so convinced. I watched God show up in my life. I watched him love me. I watched him heal my heart. And so that just set me on a trajectory of wanting to pursue him and getting to know the person of Jesus. I wanted to get to know the person of Jesus because I was bowled over by the radical love and tenderness and kindness and witness. And I use that word all the time, and it sounds so weirdo and inaccessible, but it is. I was so aware that Jesus was with me,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to know this person. And so that set me on the trajectory of really wanting to get to know Jesus. I will always be thankful that my first encounter was a one of presence, because then later on in my life, so I've always talked to God because of that experience and him being so accessible to me. I've always talked to him in a conversational way.
AA. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. Since that time, because I knew that. And actually, what's so interesting is the longer I've walked in that kind of relationship with God, I look back on my life, and he said, I've been there all along. And then he's taken me to moments in my life of when I wouldn't have even known to do some of these things. And I was responding. He showed me ways I was responding to him when I didn't know to respond that way. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
it's looking back, and God was saying, I've been with you all along. I've been with you. Even when you didn't know me, you didn't think you knew me, but I knew you, and I was there. I've always been with you. And so that place is there. And I think that's why we say all the time in the prayer house, we've never, and through all the work that we've done, we've never met one person who couldn't hear God. And I prayed with people from different faiths, from different backgrounds, and I've watched Jesus show himself to people. I didn't have to do it. I didn't have to tell him it was Jesus. I didn't have to tell him who it was, because God showed himself. It's beautiful. So I'm thankful for my history, that I feel so deeply steeped in a relational place, that God feels very approachable to me. And I think that's what we find when we start realizing that he's always communicating.
Yeah, that's why I started this call or this podcast like I did, because I really don't want people to get stuck in, well, I've never heard God's voice, and it's about hearing a male's voice.
Right.
Even though we can teach you how to right now hear God's voice, it's not going to sound like a booming male's voice in the sky. So put that part out of your mind. But you can actually engage the voice of God, but then you'll also, by engaging the voice of God, find out that you've been engaging the presence, the experience of God since long before you knew it. And
Right.
I know that's true
Yeah.
for absolutely everyone. So don't get stuck in a can I, or like only special people can, or I don't even know what that is. You may say those things, but just know there's no escaping the presence of God is what it actually is. It's discovering it. And then you can do it verbally. So we'll focus in on this little niche of how do you actually have a verbal conversation. But there's so much more, and I promise you've already experienced it. So, John, tell me about that experience for you, and just a little bit about your journey with this concept of hearing God. For you, what does that look like for you personally?
Yeah. One thing I was thinking with what you were hitting on in the beginning is, we have to look at this whole conversation through the lens of our Western world views the
Mm.
sacred and the secular as completely different.
Yeah.
They're not integrated. There's this barrier, and that's not true. And so when we get into the territory of a conversation with God, we're talking about a space where the sacred and the secular, and what I mean by that is things that we look at as practical things, as natural things. We go to work, we have nature all around us, we're doing all of these mundane seemingly tasks, we have thoughts, everything. All of that is kind of the secular, and then there's this sacred, which is the spiritual realm and all that. And so this originated in Greek dualism, but it's really entrenched, particularly in Western culture. So, interestingly enough, the first time I heard God clearly, and it wasn't an audible voice. It was a hearing, a knowing deep in me. Was actually in Mozambique, and it was after a week of fasting. And I was not someone who normally fasted, but I was staying at this orphanage for the summer, and there was a Dutch guy there and a South African, and they're like, "Let's fast for a week," and I'm like, "Sure, why not?" And every
Sounds
day I just
fun.
it
Yeah.
was a blast, yeah. So, I mean, the fasting was hard, but yeah. So every day I would journal and I would just ask God questions, and I would not get answers. And then, like on day 7 of this fast, it was like, boom, I got an answer, and I wrote it down, and I was like, at that moment, everything changes. Then the rest of that summer, I spent the nights in the prayer house. Just they had like a little concrete room that you could go into, and I would light these candles, and I would just walk around and pray. And so I think I came back from that trip with this really entrenched conviction that I can hear God because I've heard him before, and that the rest of my life is going to be lived out of this place of conversation with God. I don't think I had to like overcome a lot of weird theology about that, which is a little bit surprising to me because I didn't grow up. I think a lot of us that grew up in Western church, we knew a lot about talking to God and not a lot about talking with God.
Hmm.
And so I had grown up talking to God, and at some point, something entered into my brain that we could have this conversation, even though I'd never had it. So once I had that conversation, it began the whole next stage of my life. And there's a lot more to that.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, you guys are making me realize that if I actually talk about the very first time that I had a conscious awareness of conversation with God, it was also a knowing. That's a great word. And I hearing y'all helps me describe it. I was like 6 years old, and I had already experienced a radical answer to prayer. And that was that I was having these horrendous nightmares. They because of things in my life before, they were very graphic, like sexual nightmares. And I felt a lot of shame because of them. And my mom knew that I was having bad dreams. So she prayed, Jesus, take these dreams away. And then I never had the dream again. So that was my first experience, I should say, of knowing, oh, God works, for lack of a better word. You know what I mean? Like something here is real. And then, 2 years later, I had a dream. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird. And I was like, oh, God, what is this? And then I But then the knowing came when I was about the same age. I remember always feeling, actually, I was maybe a couple years older, feeling very insignificant. Like I
Mm.
was overwhelmed with a sense. And I was so young, but I just kind of would like, I remember looking up at the stars, and it wasn't in a positive way, like a humbling way. It was like I don't think it felt like I was lost in a void of nothing matters. And I felt that quite a bit. And I remember in my, like, I didn't verbalize it, but I remember really worried about it. And in like a moment in prayer, I remember in my own childish way, I kind of said like, God, if you're really there and I really matter, let me know. And that insignificant feeling went away. And I had
Mm.
a knowing of value that's very hard to describe because I was so young. It was so real and also so invisible. And the realness to me was in how I felt on one end of it, and then what happened to me on the other end, and that absolutely changed me, as well as the dream thing, to where I just kind of always knew, even if I questioned it, I did know that God was with me and that I could access a personal relationship. And then I got taught that a lot. And I tried to get that right a lot. And I had all kinds of insecurity and all kinds of worth issues. It's not like everything went away, but this underlying knowing did happen to me at a young age. So that's very interesting to think about in the light of this. And I have a feeling almost everybody actually does have a story like that. But I have seen, especially in our group listening to God practices, I've often seen that God will remind people of a time that was way earlier than they think that they first heard God's voice. And he'll show them where he was in a certain scenario. And they're like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about the fact that God was there, but now I can see it, which is just really cool. So we might do that as a practical exercise in a minute here. I do want to talk about this one thing because it bothers me. And it is that in certain parts of the American church, there's so much that's been put on hearing God's voice that there's kind of almost like a show around it, and it looks like a certain thing. And some people seems like they can hear God's voice better. They hear God's voice for you. And the thing is, I know that part of that's real. And then I personally have experienced a part of that's almost feels abusive. I don't think anybody's trying for it to be that way, but it almost feels like rubbing a magic genie. And then also like somehow I can hear God for you, and that could be somewhat manipulative, if that makes sense.
No, are you serious?
A little bit. Maybe
What are you
just be
talking
like
about?
a little tool of manipulation. And but I think it's really hard because I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because connection to God is so beautiful and there's so much that's changed. So I guess the last thing I'll say and then let you guys talk is, as y'all were talking too, I was realizing that early knowing. And then I've had a ton of experiences. Like I've been healed. I've had really radical encounters of God's voice, like that are strong, that you feel strong. I've had dreams that are incredibly vivid that feel like God communicating with me. But the thing that I'll say that is the constant is actually growing in this space of mental connection through dialogue with God. The still small voice is a good way to say it, or just practicing communicating. So it's not these big moments that I've had where all of a sudden I have this crazy spiritual experience. Those are great. But the constant has become having a dialogue with God that I actually choose to engage as a practice. And that is the main practice that we teach people at One. And I think it's life-changing. I think it's comforting. I think it's good. I think it is a light unto our feet and to the path. I think there's so much richness in it. And I don't want to see people throw it out because of church experiences where people kind of use this concept of hearing God to either shame or manipulate, even though they probably didn't mean to. It's just part of the cultural heritage. So it's a big deal to me that wherever we land on this podcast, that every single person who listens understands, like Anne-Marie said, it's accessible. Like John said, like you can do it. Everybody can. You can at any time. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be easy, but it actually is pretty easy. And I hope by the end of this podcast that you feel like you know how, you know the basics, and you know that you can practice it. Always feel free to join us on our calls in the One Circle. One Circle is a practicing community. And it's basically give a monthly donation. It could be $1, it could be $1,000. It doesn't matter. But if you want to be part of this community, you pay any recurring amount to One, and you are part of a practicing community that we resource, and that we have Zoom calls, we have workshops, and it's all about growing in your ability to do this. But also, if you never look that up on this on this podcast, we are going to give you practices. So anything on y'all's mind, I just kind of want to give an open space for things that are popping up for you as I'm talking and as you're listening. And then the place I do want to go is, what are the healthy practices for hearing God? Or what are healthy ways of thinking about it? Because there is a spectrum. And I don't know whether you're inside the church, outside the church, I'm sure there's also that end of the spectrum of like, we all hear it on the news. Somebody thinks they're hearing from God. They're holding a sign up that a comet's going to hit us. And, you think of like cult leaders. There's that version of hearing God too. So what does health on a spectrum look like?
When I came back from Mozambique, I was like so hungry for the more of God, that what it looks like to live from relationship and connection with God. I'd seen people healed. I had this burning desire for that. So I ended up in more of the charismatic world, which is not where I grew up and I didn't have a lot of context for. And looking back on that experience over the years, I can see that like our relationship with God is for the purpose of a journey, like our journey with God, and that journey bears fruit, and we mature and we grow. And if we approach hearing God apart from the context of a journey, then I think it creates all sorts of opportunities for it to be self-gratifying and chaotic. And so it's like hard to define in so many ways, like what it looks like to be super healthy. So where I come down to is like, on this journey, we need to be growing in our maturity. We need to be growing in wisdom. We need to be growing in our relationship with God. And the growing in maturity is really renewing the mind. And so if we just isolate hearing God, then there's all sorts of ways that this can go wrong. Mm-hmm. I can try to go into examples, but I think if you guys have seen this, if you've been in different church communities where someone will stand up and say, "Thus saith the Lord," a lot. And it's like, man, that's such a strong statement to make over a group of people. Or you've had people give you words and say, "The Lord's telling me X, Y, and Z," and for you. And sometimes that can be like a huge blessing, but so many times there's something else going on there.
Yeah. I think you hit on something that matters to me, and that's just also so helpful, is that the whole point of God wanting to talk to me is because he wants relationship with me. The journey is about growing in relationship. And I think that clarifies a lot for me. And that also sort of clears away a lot of the clutter. Mm-hmm. If I remember that this isn't about me getting it right. Am I hearing what he's saying right? And then am I supposed to go do everything he's saying? It's what he cares most about is the relationship. And cultivating that. And as I've grown in that, that's what keeps me coming back. Is not because I just want information from him. My experience of my conversations with him, or what they do, is they draw me into a deeper knowing and a deeper love of God. I love God so much because I hear his tenderness. And then I also learn, because of his voice, he knows me so deeply. He knows me deeply. And the journey is one of connectedness and layers and not having to get it all right today and doing, quote, what he says right today, but just in the hearing. Yeah. And in the listening. And because he knows me so much better than I know myself.
we take the same problem and we just repackage it, which is we want to do works for God.
Yeah.
It's hard for us to want to become who he created us to be. And those are two totally different things. And so when we approach hearing God through the lens of works and like I'm supposed to do some great work, this is how we end up. I mean, we've got it across the spectrum everywhere right now where people are hearing God about all these different things in our world. And I think the safest position to take is most of the hearing God is for relationship. It's for maturity. It's for me to become who he's created me to be. And out of that is going to flow the fruit that he wants out of my life.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's definitely in the territory of our human conversation.
Mm.
I think podcast too, and it takes its shape really clearly in hearing God, and it really has for me. And what we talked about on that is like every single human journey has this complexity in it. And this is by design. It's okay. It's part of it. But every human wants to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And and we have to learn to live from eating from the tree of life so that we don't die. And the tree of the knowledge of good and evil practically looks like something for me. It looks like my way of being right in the world and my
Mm-hmm.
way of avoiding being wrong. And that for me is going to look different than Anne Marie, than John. But it looks like something that makes me feel safe. But it's different than living from relationship, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll use the word oneness. And I mean that we're a people made by a God who's present to us, who's not trying to test us to see if we can earn love. He's telling us you are love. You're from love. You're of love. But you don't know that all the time. And it's something to wake up to and to learn. And the human journey is that none of us came into the world with getting it all right. And that's not the goal, actually. But it's normal and human that we're trying to get it right. And so how this plays out for me in hearing God, you just said it, John. And I can see it, especially in the extreme unhealthy examples that I see where it's like a community that's like, it's not normalized to hear God, but it's special if you hear God. And then if you hear God, you need to act on it. And you better get it right. And you better hear God right for other people. And that can lead to just a really unhealthy path. I think a healthier version is everybody can hear God and we are on a journey. And it's an amazing gift that we can communicate with the Spirit of God in all kinds of ways. How do we talk about it? How do we practice it? That's hopefully what we're doing here. But for me, even this year, I've had such a struggle because in my normal going about my life, I have had things that I felt like God was saying to me because I do practice this every day, multiple times a day because I like it. I felt like it really made me go, am I hearing that right? And it tweaked this very human part of me that was like very afraid of getting it wrong because it was something so deeply impactful to me, so deeply impactful to my family. And there was no way out of it apart from continuing the journey of hearing God, continuing the conversation, wrestling with the conversation, having the conversation with other trusted friends. And sometimes that went well and sometimes that didn't. And there's no way forward but to be present in this moment and continue the relationship. Because what would totally thwart me is when I was so obsessed with, is this right? Am I getting it right? Am I doing it right? And I was very threatened. I hope that makes sense without giving too many details that we don't have time for. But the journey of hearing God does not, I think when people think hearing God is not normal and it's only for the special few, then we look at it more as a miracle that's going to strike us and change our life, just like getting healed from cancer or whatever you would want to happen. Some people look at hearing God as if God really spoke to me, I would forever be changed and it would be special. No, that's a myth. God's already spoken to you. You just maybe didn't know it because the main way and tool that he's going to use is that inner voice and that the space in your mind where you process communication with God. And number two, you might be dead on, have an amazing experience with God. It will change your life, just like we all talked about. We had a knowing early on. It led us, but it just led us to the next step of the journey and made our feet more sure for that next step. It did not fix the rest of our lives. And there's nothing that you're going to find that's going to fix the rest of your lives. Even if an angel came and appeared to you and told you what's going to happen in the future, that's still very complicating, because you have to wake up the next morning and live with what happened to you yesterday and go, well, what the heck do I do now? And I think the only way through it is to continue having the conversation. Back to the just concept of hearing God is about relationship. It's not even about hearing. It's not about getting it right. And yet, around the things that matter to us, we will get triggered about getting it right.
And to your point about using the word hearing, we're talking about abiding. We're talking about living from a place of union or oneness, where it's a constant part of our life and everything that we do. And it's not that I ask a question, I get a word back that's a literal answer to my question. We've talked about this a lot before, but so many times I'll want an answer to a question, and when I either get a picture from the Lord or hear something, feels a deep knowing, it's often like an invitation into a totally different conversation than the one, because it's not outcome focused. It's not about output. It's about connection.
Yeah.
That's so good, because I was just about to say, I think a healthy parameter is to say, don't ask God about the future. Like, don't ask questions about should I or shouldn't I? And then at the same time, it's going to be normal for you in relationship at times, especially with the God who knows everything, to want to ask those questions. So you can't even really put these limits of don't or shouldn't. It's more like, understand that you're engaging with one who is much wiser.
Yeah.
So it's not a genie. That's what I mean by genie in the bottle. It's not like, here's my question, give me the answer I need and want now to make me feel better. Here's my question. He may give you an answer that makes you go so much deeper and look at things. It's really this rabbinical model that Jesus lived, which was answering the question with a much better question that makes you actually think and grow.
Which is what we talk about a lot about when I ask a question and I don't feel like I'm getting an answer. Well, no, there's a wall. There's a wall and I can't hear. I'm not hearing. I can't hear God. Okay. Well, what does that wall look like? What is that? It's like he will lead us into finding. God leads us into finding God. And that's what's so beautiful, is that and that's once again proof that it's not about getting it right. It's about knowing God and being known by God. And it's the relationship. And I love that, because one of the big barriers too is, and we hear this all the time, is, well, how do I know that's really God?
Mm-hmm. That's just wanting to get it right too.
Yeah.
But it's a great question that I have too.
It is a great question, because that's the beauty of doing this together. We get to do it ourselves, and then we get to do it together. And when we do it together, it's one of the reasons I love our calls, is because God is very consistent. God is always God. God has the nature of God, loving, good, kind, and so there are things that separate apart the character, that set apart the character of God's voice and other voices.
Yes.
And you see the consistency of that. And so then you begin to trust what you're hearing, because well, I know that's not God's voice, because that's full of shame and that's full of fear, and you know what I mean? And then I begin to really recognize God's voice because it has a character to it.
Yeah, and I love that you're saying that. I think it's a great place for us to just talk briefly about the Hearing God chart. We developed something, it's kind of the only real pen to paper, simple formula, if you will, that we've developed around hearing God, because it is this limitless experience and it's a journey. And this chart for us is not about good, bad, here's the right way to hear God and here's the wrong way. It's more about just discerning the root of where something's coming from that you think you may be getting or hearing from God, and the fruit. By what I mean by that is, if you believed what you think you may be hearing from God, and if you acted on it, play it out. Does it produce love, life, freedom, joy? Does it bless you and other people? Or if you look at it, like you just said, shame's a great example. I could hear a voice that sounds religious and even maybe sounds a little loving, but if I actually play it out, it actually produces shame. And if I look at it, I can see that the root of it is actually shaming myself. And I know that I got caught up in that because I've been doing that my whole life in my mind. I've been shaming myself around this area. And maybe I even grew up in a religious community that said, you're bad and sinful, and then shame tacked on some Bible verses in there. And so you're not even looking at the technicality of what's being said. You're looking at where is it coming from and what will it grow? Much more organic look at it. So the chart's simple, but think of it as like a tree, more like what are the roots of where this thing or this concept that you're processing, what are the roots and what are the fruits? And so if we were going to make a simple hearing God chart, how we do it is very simple, a simple way to look at something that's complex. And we just put, I'm holding this up if you're watching the video, but I just put God on the left side of my paper and I put other on the right side. And then I'm just drawing a line down between them. And under God, I'm going to put some things that are universally true. And I could really just do this first one, and that's all we need. And it is that the voice of God sounds like love. It is love. And it is going to come from a loving place, and it will produce love. And a voice that is just not the voice of God is the voice of fear. And so you can just even look at that simple one. But if I went further down and put some more words under the God side, and I'm going to have you guys chime in here, one of the first words I would put is freedom. Comes from a place of freedom. So what I mean by that is it's going to feel kind and empowering. These are more words to describe love. So what the voice of God is going to be more kind and empowering than the normal voice that's ticker tape running through your head. It's going to be more insightful and wise is another word I would put on here. Versus something that feels like it's locking you down into that. You must get it right. You must perform. So I'm going to put shame on that. Or another word, it would be condemnation. And condemnation feels like you should be doing this, but you're not measuring up. You haven't gotten it right and you never will. You're not good enough. It's this very accusatory voice. That's just not how God speaks or where God comes from. And this is from 20 years of listening to people have conversations with God, and they will come in thinking that the thought they're thinking is God's thought about them. And then they come out going, oh, that was totally a voice of shame and condemnation. Oh, great. If you can see this and turn on the video, John just put up a slide, and I'm sure we can find a way to attach that. But that's what I was trying to describe. This one has a lot of words on it, but I love this chart because it helps you just recognize, hey, there's a thought running through my head. Where's that coming from? Oh, it sounds like control. And you're not even taking this on as I'm being controlling. You don't even have to do that. Just recognize that the thought sounds like control, and you can use it as an access point to have a conversation with God. So if I had a thought run through my mind that sounds like control, I could just go, okay, here's the thought that came through my mind. Jesus, what do you say? Or Jesus, what do you want me to know? And whatever comes to my mind next, I'm going to capture it. Maybe I write it down. Maybe I put it in my voice memo. And then I'm just going to check it. Does it sound like love, life, abundance, conviction, meaning it sounds really true? Gives you insight and understanding. Belonging, grace, mercy, connection, purpose, wisdom, freedom, reconciliation, hope. And if the voice that I hear when I'm listening to God doesn't sound like those things, I'm going to go, maybe that's not it. I'm going to pass on that. If the voice that I think is God's actually sounds like and creates for me fear, judgment, lack, condemnation, shame, accusation, control, disconnect, paranoia, insecurity, makes me feel stuck in oughts and shoulds or divisions or taking a side, just pause for a minute and let that be a way into an actual conversation with love. Okay, I'm feeling this thought, or I'm having this thought about something, and it makes me feel insecure. Jesus, what do you say? And then listen, because then you're going to check it again and go, is this thing that I think that might be from God, is it full of life and love? And you can just go back and forth with your thought life and with your conversation with God, grounding yourself and rooting yourself in that left side of the chart.
You know, I think it's interesting because to people that say, well, what if I hear God wrong? It's like, if you take this chart and you stick to the left side of the chart, God's voice, and the stuff that sounds like fear, judgment, shame, all that stuff, you just ignore all of that. And then you make it not about big directional decisions and more about daily conversations. Then the real question isn't, what if I hear wrong? It's, what am I missing out on if I'm not living from this place of union and conversation and connection that I was created for?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
love that, John.
that's really good. And I hope that people, because I know there was a time in my life where the religious community that I was a part of was very scared by the idea that God would be called anything but Jesus, you know? And I hope that listening to the quality of God's voice would bring comfort, because Jesus makes himself known. We don't have to worry about, I would have missed out on some really powerful experiences of watching Jesus show himself to someone who would have not, they would have told you they did not believe in Jesus, or that they believed in Jesus, but Jesus wasn't their quote, God or whatever. But because of being able to go into this space and trusting that Jesus reveals himself, I don't need to worry about that. I would have missed out on some, and people I was praying with, I have some incredible stories about, I have one that somebody told me in Nepal about someone revealing, I mean, Jesus revealed himself through their experience with Buddha. That Buddha basically told this person about Jesus. I mean, it's like we get so caught up, I think, in what we're calling everything, and how we're defining, because we think we need to get it right. We're so worried about that. God is so much bigger than that. He's so much bigger, and he's inviting us into something so near and deep and expansive all at the same time, that God is not worried about God. You know, God is not worried. I don't think God's worried about what we're calling him.
No.
Yeah.
I
You
There's
also,
this, in Proverbs 4, I think it's Proverbs 4, it talks about how if you pursue wisdom like a miner that's digging for gold, then where you end up at will be the fear of the Lord. And the fear of the Lord, we hear that and we think literal fear. What it actually means is right understanding of the vastness of God, like
Wow.
of the bigness of God. So I always think of it as, I will understand who I am in relationship to who God is. And that is the byproduct of this pursuit of wisdom. And so we're so scared to venture into the unknown. And the real cost is not just missing out on great conversations and great experiences.
Yeah.
The whole one journey is built around hearing God to understand identity and to step
Yeah.
into identity. So the real cost of this is not knowing and living from your identity. And to me, that's a tragedy.
yeah. And because we are so easily, and I am going to use this word that I think has been abused, we're so easily deceived. We so easily settle for less than who we really are and really do think it's us. But it's really our adaptation of trying to get us right. But deep down, we're like, it feels like something's missing, or like I want a little bit more, like this thing that used to bring me joy doesn't, or like I've gotten success in the world in this way. And I thought that's who I was supposed to be, but it's lacking. I mean, everybody is on a journey where you're trying to become who you are, but you will miss the mark. And it's normal. And truly, I think only in the context of honest communion, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to say that and let it be as broad as it is, do we really start to see ourselves? And I'm thinking of two things. This thing that Roz, who's on our team, always says is that we have these things in our eyes called mirror neurons, where when I look into Anne Marie's eyes, you're the person on my screen right now, I actually get myself reflected back to me on this very micro level, and that's one of the like largest building blocks of brain healthy brain connection. There's all kinds of things on Instagram, and I'm all into all of it, of how you have health, and a lot of it is actually focused on individual pursuits of health, when the biggest thing is like relational connection and presence. Just looking in Anne-Marie's eyes, if we were face to face, would be doing amazing, explosive things for our brains without saying a word, without doing anything or proving anything. So back to why we might want to have conversations with God is because literally in the turning my attention to the one who's with me, I'm not necessarily seeing a face, but I'm starting to look and have a conversation with one who sees me and knows me. All of a sudden, who I really am starts getting reflected back to me. And that's the only way I can know myself. I will not know myself in the isolation of myself. Earlier, John asked me what my superpower was, and I said, I don't like that question, but it is a good question. But the thing that came to my mind was something that a friend of ours says is, it's hard to read the label of the jar from the inside of the jar. And that's so true in this. We need whatever relationship and communion brings to us to even have a clue who we are. And a lot of us are missing that. Not only in the we don't believe we have full access to God and we can practice this thing of union or awareness of our connection and what that might look like practically, but also we may not realize that we were designed to be deeply connected to other people who are growing, who can reflect back to us what they see in us and who we are. So that's another reason why what we do at One is help people practice connected practices for your relationship with God, but also do it together. It works so beautifully together, because what happens is when I'm on my own, I can have a practice of connection or meditation. Maybe I'm not even trying to communicate, but I'm meditating. But when I do that and I'm in a group of maybe 10 or 12 and we all actually share about it, what you hear is the thing that Anne Marie was saying earlier. When people are sharing what they think God might be saying and where they are, and they show up honest because it's a safe group, they don't have to have the answers. They just kind of tell you where they are and what they felt like God was saying. You start to hear that thing that you just can't experience any other way, I don't think, where you hear what Anne Marie feels like God is saying. You hear what John feels like God is saying. You hear like what I think he might be saying to me. And then you hear about 10 other people and you do hear this voice, this thing, everybody has access, and it does sound so ridiculously loving, freeing, kind, gracious, that it's like undeniable that's a real thing. And for me, that matters too around hearing God, because I can question what I'm hearing from God. I honestly can't question what has happened in this group where everybody practiced the same practice, and you go, wow, God said that to this person, it's totally different, that to this person, but it's coming from the same place. It's crazy. I mean, I think it's actually one
Yes.
of the best experiences of my life to do that on a consistent basis. Because if you wonder if God speaks, just show up on one of those calls for a couple times, and then you will know, and you will also get a sense of what it sounds like.
You will. And it's what's one of the things that blows me away is after every call, we're not focused on, quote, the answer.
Mm-hmm.
It's more we all walk away from the call having been with the person.
Yeah.
We've been with God all together.
And
And
it feels good.
it leaves an imprint on you. And that's where we talk about identity and the self and understanding who we are. I think it's also important to understand what exactly we're talking about, even when we're saying that, is we're not talking about, your best self and, you know, psychological whatever. We actually do incorporate a lot of psychology because it's interesting and it matters in a lot of ways, how we were wired and how our brains are wired. But what we're really talking about is the truest self that is made to commune with God, to live in that place of union and oneness and live from that. That's the self we're talking about. That's the self we get to discover in God, with others. And hopefully through our journey, we're living more and more out of that place of love and union.
Yeah, the word oneness and union is so big, and
Mhm.
and I think that our way in has been to help people have a practical conversation with God that demonstrates what oneness is.
Yeah.
It's not exclusive. It's not saying this is the only way to experience your oneness. Obviously, it's so much more expansive. But in the fact that you can have a conversation and you can hear the still small voice of God, it will come to your mind. You can process it out loud then if you want to. You can ask questions. You can continue the dialogue. You can move from monologue thinking, which is a lie, to dialogue thinking, meaning all the thoughts in your head are not alone in your head. You have thoughts coming through your mind that just happened because of who your ancestors were, what you saw on a billboard last night, or the dream that you had, or the TV show. I mean, the thoughts that are coming through the screen of our mind are not just ours. It's all kinds of voices, including your voice, your authentic voice, including your performance voice, including your false self, your real self, including the influence John's had on my life, including God. So the practice of hearing God is kind of making space to just let all of that get quiet and going, okay, I want to hear the voice that's deepest. I want to hear God's. And the thing is, another thing I've noticed is when people are new to hearing God too, they're very nervous about, well, what if it's my voice I'm hearing? They want to know the
Yeah.
difference between their voice and God's voice. And there's two things I always say. Practice the dialogue, moving from a monologue, it's all my voice, to dialogue. I'm going to have a conversation with Jesus, God. If you will just go, here's what I'm thinking, and I'm going to write it out, and I'm going to put it in the form of a question. And then listen for Jesus, and then add another question or thought and listen for Jesus. Just go back and forth. Your voice gets fleshed out real clearly, and God's gets fleshed out real clearly. The other thing I often say is, I'm not at all concerned about really discerning the difference between your authentic voice and God's authentic voice, because it's almost like this dance and this intermingling that's so beautiful and good, because your authentic voice is going to be incredibly beautiful and loving, coming from the source of all love and life, if it's your real authentic voice. Your insecurities, no. Your who you think you should be, no. But your real voice, I'm not real concerned about differentiating. It's more about getting rid of all the things that aren't you and aren't God. And you will, it's this dance. It really is. And you get to explore it, and that will be so beautiful, because all of a sudden you start to recognize so much more quickly the voices that aren't yours and aren't God's. And that's such a key, and such a key to life, and such a freeing thing when you can go, okay, wait, that's not me and that's not God. So me and God are going to have a conversation about this.
It's good. I don't have a lot to add to that.
I want to do a practice with everybody
Okay, let's do it.
before we hop off.
Before we do that, though, I do just want to reiterate, for some reason, everyone's always worried that they're hearing themselves. And I get real practical about it, like taking what you're saying and going even further. If what you're saying to yourself, if it was you, was encouraging and in line with what God says in the Bible and what we know to be true about him, like, what's the worst case scenario? The
Exactly.
truth is, most people have such horrible conversations with themselves all
Mhm.
day long, and it's actually the person the identity that they are living out of, that's been shaped by all the horrible things that they've said to themselves, all the judgment, shame, fear, insecurity, and the horrible things that other people have said to them. And some of these things are actually horrible. Some of them are just like, oh, you're so stupid, you know? And I literally, like, I've talked to so many people where that's mostly what they're hearing is, I'm not enough. I'm stupid. I make bad decisions. Nobody likes me. I'm not attractive enough, all that stuff. So it's actually revolutionary just to begin to step into that, hearing that other voice, even if it wasn't from God. But like you're saying, once you start doing that, you end up in this dance where it starts to become really clear. For me, I know God's voice because it's often not the thing that I was thinking or the way that I would normally think. It's often a contrast to it. So I want to encourage anybody that if you're listening to this and you're hung up on, what if it's just me talking to myself in my own head? It's like, use the hearing God chart. What's the worst thing that could happen? You'll figure it out as you go.
Yeah. And that's why the chart matters, because it's like, well, if you think God's saying you're a dumbass and you should go murder someone, that is clearly not in alignment with life and love. So, and we're not even going to go, bad you can't hear God. We're going to go, hey, how does that feel to have that thought go through your mind? Hey, would it be okay if we talk to Jesus about that? Like, literally, it's just a door into something. So almost just like, whether you're not sure if it's you or God, or maybe say like John's great point. What if it's not God? What if it's just the deepest voice inside of you, and that is love? Or the deepest thing you're connected to outside of yourself, and that's love? I'm not too worried about it. I mean, if the worst thing that happens is you love yourself a little bit more and the world around you, okay, great. Do you want to do a practice?
Yeah,
Do it.
I want you
Okay.
to lead us.
I'd love to. You're also very good at it. Both of you are. So in the future of these, you guys need to lead them. I just want to do a really basic one, and we're going to use that here in God chart. We're just going to use the first one on it, which is on the God side. One of the hallmarks of the voice of God is love. And on the other, and I'm not even saying bad, because there's healthy versions of fear. There's the healthy version of fear that keeps me from jumping off a cliff. Great. I'm just saying the kind of fear where I start to lock down and die. I know it's eventual, but if it's making this happen, where control starts to happen and I worry about that and I'm trying to do this, that's the fear I'm talking about. That's not the voice of God. So if you're a human, you've experienced both. When you've had incredibly loving thoughts or experiences where you felt loved, whether you knew God was there or not, I'm willing to bet that was the presence of God. When you've had experiences of trembling and fear and being locked down, I guarantee you are not the only one. It's so common and human. So all we're going to do in this practice is look at both sides of that part of the chart, both love and fear. And we're just going to treat them both as trains of thought. So I'm not even going to say voice, because sometimes people get caught up in voice, like as a voice you need to hear audibly. But what I mean by voice is the thought train in your head. And we know that that's so much more than a voice. What I mean by that is it's more than words. Like if I say ocean to you right now, notice what happens in your brain. And then think for a minute about fear that can come kind of be stirred up by oceans and experience of oceans. And then think about how oceans can represent like the vastness of love. I love the ocean. I love being on the ocean. I feel free in the ocean. But somebody else who doesn't spend as much time in the ocean as I do might have only had bad experiences. So we could say the word ocean, and what might be coming up for me is like fishing at 6 a.m., watching the sunrise, and it's so peaceful. And what might be coming up for them is like, I might die in the abyss. Fear, love. Is the ocean fearful and loving? No, the ocean's the ocean. but my experience of it is going to trigger all kinds of memories and experiences for me that come across the screen in my mind, and feelings, pictures, little movies in my mind, words, ideas, gut intuition, impressions, lots of trains of thought. Not just one, but you may have had all kinds of different experiences of the ocean, and your mind goes to 10 places when I say the ocean. I'm saying all this to tell you this is normal. This is how our brains work. And when you're in a conversation with God, you've got to just allow space for all of those things to pop. So I'm curious what happened for both of you when I said the word ocean. If you could almost like crack open your brain for us, Anne-Marie, and give me the ticker tape of what happened. And I understand it's not just going to be one thing. It might be this, then that, and then I thought of this. That's okay. I just want you to kind of give me the running thought pattern that happened for you. And I want you also to give me beyond the words, meaning I know you're going to have to use words, but did a picture pop in your mind? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Immediately a picture popped in my mind of the vastness of the ocean. Like I was looking out across it and I saw the vastness of it. And then I saw deep below the surface. And I just started having thoughts about how excited that makes me feel, because like I love to go to an aquarium and see all the things that I just had no idea were even in the ocean, and how limitless it is and how creative it is. That's where my brain went. I went down this train of thought about all of
Perfect.
that stuff.
And so what we're going to practice right now, we just practiced something, and that is just noticing what's happening in your brain. When I said the word ocean, that's actually a practice to just notice. It's like watching your own thoughts. It's a really important practice, actually. It's about awareness. I'm going to have John share, but noticing what you notice is a phrase that we're going to use a lot. We use it all the time, actually. Notice what you notice when you ask Jesus this question. But I'm not even asking Jesus questions yet, because I want you to see and get a feel for how this works. And the space of conversation with God happens in the space where you notice your thoughts. That's why I don't even want you to pray right now. I just want you to notice what you notice about your thoughts when I say the word ocean. Okay, so John, just describe for me what you noticed about your thoughts when I said the word ocean.
Yeah, I was seeing the beach and then I was seeing the ocean, and I was really fixated on the sand for some reason. I don't know
When you
why.
say seeing, what do you mean? Was it like in front of your
Just a
face, like you
picture in
were
my head.
there?
No.
Okay, it's more like, is it like the imprint of a memory? Like I remember being
Yeah.
there? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
and then I went into a memory with a friend at the beach.
Okay, so the point being, just a word like ocean is going to conjure up all kinds of things. I could ask John, how did that feel?
At first, the feeling of the sand was a little bit negative because I don't probably love the beach as much as you guys do, but I was like, oh, sand, it gets all over everything, and if it gets on my under my truck, it's gonna rust stuff out. Um, and then when I had the memory with a friend, I was like, oh, I love the beach. It's so much fun. We had such a great day. So
Perfect. And so all I did was ask John how he felt, or how that made him feel. And we got more, actually, right? Because the thing is, our brains move so fast. We're brilliant. They move much faster than our ability to communicate, and they move even faster than our ability to be aware of what's going on. Like right now, you're not aware that your brain's telling your body to maintain a million different functions, but it is. So we just got out of John that he really doesn't like the sand, and his mind went to his car and how he would protect his car from rust. Like all that happened in like half a second of thinking about the ocean, or maybe 3 seconds of thinking about the ocean. So again, I'm drawing this out for everybody because half of the battle, or 90% of the battle of the practice of hearing God, is actually validating how complex your thoughts are. Meaning, notice how rapid everything runs through your mind. And it happens so fast that this is also what would happen. When you start to turn your attention to God and notice your thoughts, sometimes you'll think, I'm not getting anything. But if I said, crack open your brain and tell me every single thing that went through your mind, you would be like, well, I actually thought about how I have to go to the store and I need to buy stamps and my daughter needs an outfit for tomorrow. But you're calling it nothing. So the very first step in hearing God is don't judge your thoughts. Just think them and notice them. So you don't even have to start from like prayer or worship or like getting still. You could literally just be in the shopping line at Target trying to pay. And you could do this practice by just noticing your thoughts. Go, what am I thinking right now? Well, I'm thinking I need to hurry home because I've got to get dinner in the oven. Or you could be thinking, gosh, I really want to go back and get that mug that I saw that was super cute. And I know my daughter wants a blanket, but I don't know if I want to give her another blanket. Like, I mean, these would be my thoughts at Target, but yours may be somewhere else. And then you're also going to have feelings connected to those, and they're going to come with shoulds, and they're going to come with worries about the future. And you could probably find some love in there, and you could probably find some fear influence in there. So our thoughts are brilliantly complex. But if you can notice them, you are well on your way to having a really great conversation with God. Just don't judge it and be honest, at least with yourself. Okay, we're going to take now what we were just doing about the ocean, and I want to lead you through noticing a little bit more in the context of thinking about the ocean. Okay, so you heard from Anne-Marie, you heard from John. I'm curious for you guys who are listening, if I could give you a space to tell me what came to your mind with the ocean, even if you think you went to the grocery store or to your work or somewhere that you weren't supposed to be thinking, it doesn't matter. All I want you to do is be real aware of what happened when you thought about the ocean. Now go back and think about it some more, and I'm going to ask you what you appreciate about what came to your mind. And there may be things you don't appreciate, kind of like John and the sand. But do notice what you appreciate and kind of where your attention goes now. Follow where your brain wants to go in that picture of the ocean, in that setting of the ocean, in that prompt of the ocean. Okay, what happened now? What do you appreciate and where did your mind go? Again, I'm just helping you do a practice of noticing what you notice and becoming aware of your own thoughts. And I'm giving you prompts for that. That's the practice we're doing right now. Anne-Marie, what did you notice? What do you appreciate?
What I noticed was I felt connected to God with the picture of the ocean. And then I immediately saw my feet in the sand, and I felt grounded and safe and connected with my feet in the sand. And what I appreciated was that connectedness that I was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciated that I felt so connected to God in my relationship to the ocean and the sand and the experience of it.
I love that too, because you're not even asking God a question. We haven't officially prayed, but I'm not surprised, because how many times have we as people in a setting that God made that's beautiful felt connected? You know, I think most people, they might go, I don't know what God's voice sounds like, but I know when I'm in the mountains that I've felt the presence of what I might or might not call God. And I just think that's remarkable and beautiful. And so common in a really beautiful way. John, what came to your mind? Appreciation and noticing.
Yeah, I was just noticing the feeling that I had being with a friend, just spending hours hanging out, talking, and just that there is a level of joy that I was experiencing there. And then that reminded me of this other time with my family at the beach and just how much joy we were all having in this moment. And I'm probably not someone that thinks about joy a lot. Like I feel like I have a lot of joy, but I don't think about it a ton. So I was just really noticing that and appreciating just this deep experience of joy coming from those two memories.
Awesome. So before we even turn our attention to a dialogue with God, if we kind of, I don't know, analyzed this, I think we can all say already, like, joy. It's a beautiful thing that's got to be in the God territory, the God and human territory. Groundedness, love, presence, relationship. And you can I think even just by becoming aware, we're just separating out the love voice, the peace, the grounded, the joy from the fear, the shame, the busy, the hurry, the not enough. But now we are going to have just a dialogue. So all you're going to do is the same thing. Don't try to do anything else because you don't have to. It's literally just thinking your own thoughts. You don't even have to pray. So if you're listening here and you're like, well, I've never tried to do this big thing called hearing God's voice and really think I'm going to get an answer back, it's as simple as thinking, which you've already done. So now I want you to go back again to the thoughts about the ocean, and your thoughts can go to a new place. It doesn't even matter, but just notice again where your thoughts are when I say the word ocean. And now I'm going to pray for you. All I'm going to do is say, God, where's your presence in this picture? And all I want you to do is notice where your thoughts go now. God, where are you in this picture? And then I'm just going to ask God one more question for you. You don't even have to think about it. Just notice where your thoughts go. Notice what you feel, even in your body. God, what do you want me to know from your heart to mine about the metaphor of this picture? And all you're doing is following your thoughts and then looking at them, noticing them, and see if it's coming from a place of love or is it stirring up fear? If it's stirring up fear, no problem. Notice it and ask God about it. Okay, what happened for y'all there as we noticed the presence? God, where are you in this moment or this picture? And then what do you want me to know from your heart to mine about this metaphor? And I want to hear from you guys. I just want to say, lately I've remembered how powerful metaphor is because God keeps using them with me. Because we're thinking because we're praying in a space of your thought life, it's going to be very metaphorical because your mind is always in metaphor. What do I mean by that? I mean, your mind remembers pictures like hiking a mountain, going to the ocean, being on a computer, hugging a friend, and your mind makes meaning out of them. And then God is constantly using metaphor. I mean, it's throughout scripture, the 6,000 years of scripture. It's like God is rock, God is living water, God is shepherd, God is father, God is mother. Is it that God's only a mother? No. But we do need to hold that one up because for a long time people thought God was only father. Is God only a father? No. Father's a metaphor to help us understand this ever expanding huge concept. So there's all kinds of metaphors that God will use. Ocean is one of them. So whether you felt like you clearly saw God's presence or not, if your mind just stayed fixed in a peaceful place in the ocean, don't judge it. Find that maybe that's the metaphor for you today to help you understand the presence of God with you. Does that make sense? A huge piece of enjoying hearing God's voice is don't judge it, just notice the metaphor. So what happened for you, John?
Yeah, I was at that memory. Can't remember the beach, Pensacola. Yeah, in Pensacola, and we had gone to this place. I didn't think the beach was going to be very nice. Like I had no expectations, and then we showed up and we had it all to ourselves, and it was just like I thought I was in another country. I was just like, this is incredible. Like it's the most beautiful beach experience I ever had. So I was there, and then you asked the question, where was God in that picture? And I was just like everywhere. Like I got chills because not only in the beauty of everywhere I looked, it was just beautiful. And there were fish jumping out of the water, and the water was crystal clear, and the sand was perfectly white, and the kids were full of joy and happiness. And Heather and I were happy and connected. And it was like everything about it was perfect, but also in the fact that we ended up there at that moment in time, and that God had, we weren't really like planning to go to Pensacola. We just ended up going to Pensacola, had very low expectations. So then the question of where's God in this, and what is the metaphor that he has for you. I felt like it was that he architected that moment for us and that experience, and that he has good things for us. Like just that I architected this for you, and I have more of these good things for you. Memories, experiences with the people that I love, but also of his creation. So it went everywhere. It was pretty intense. It was awesome.
I love that. And when you're talking about it, not that it's about me, but I felt chills too. It just feels, it resonates. And I think that's part of the beauty of getting to say things like that out loud, because what you just said is encouraging to me that God brings these beautiful moments into our life, and he has more of them. Like, this is part of the journey. I love that. It's super encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to check it, it's a no-brainer on this one. But is it coming from a place of love? Would it produce love in John's life if he believed it? Or is it coming from a place of fear? Would it produce fear in John's life if he believed it? Clearly, let John judge that one for himself. Now you can judge it. Now that you've listened, now that you've given your mind space to talk and to engage in dialogue intentionally, now go, okay, I can put on my rational brain and go, is this coming from a place of love? And John, what would you say?
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it invites me deeper into trust, because I can go spend a whole bunch of money to go fly to some beautiful beach and hope that it's as perfect as that experience was, and I probably can't go recreate that. But it reminds me time and time again of the unique ways that God creates these memories and experiences for our family, and how much that means to me. And so it invites me into trust, because I go, I can't I can't conjure up this stuff for myself. I can't create this for myself, but I have this big God who loves me, and who is creating those for me and leading me into those experiences. That makes me want to trust God so much more and let go of more control of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like freedom. Goodness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anne Marie, what happened for
Mm-hmm.
you?
As I was standing on the beach with my feet in the sand, looking out over the ocean, Jesus was like, sometimes Jeff will come behind me and wrap his arms around the back of me when I'm looking out, and he'll be looking out. And that's what Jesus was doing. He was wrapped around me, hugging me, looking out over the ocean with me. And I felt so enveloped and held. And it felt really just affectionate and comfortable and like home in that place. And what I felt like I heard him saying is like, as we're standing here looking out over all the mystery and all the vastness, I'm here with you. I'm here with you, holding you. I'm loving you. So at the same time, it was just this, at the same time, there was all this vastness and creativity and mystery. He knew me and loved me. And it was all happening at once. And what it did for me, like, to continue what you're asking John, is that I love spaces of awe and wonder, because they do so connect me to God. I feel so connected to God in those spaces. I love being in awe of God. I love being in awe of creation, or a person, or a baby, or whatever, and just the wonder of it all, not having to have all the answers, being full of questions, but held in my questions. And it made me want more of that and appreciate that. I could have gone down the appreciation road on awe and wonder, and being with Jesus in it was just really powerful. It felt so loving and safe and held, in the face of a lot that I don't understand, in a good way, that I wonder about. So I loved it. I loved that
It's so good.
experience with him.
Well, good job, you guys. And thank you for being willing to share too. I know that's also sometimes just a little bit of a hurdle because we don't all walk around, one, sharing our thoughts, our train of thoughts, two, sharing what we think we heard from a conversation with God or what we felt or what we experienced with God. Um, it is a normal experience for what we do at one because we've created safe spaces for it because it's easier to practice it together. And so you can see kind of how this would go. Basically, what we just did with John and Anne Marie, I would also participate if we were doing a group, and whoever participated shares. And no one is saying, well, then this means this about you, your theology, and you should go do this. That is out of bounds. All we're doing is practicing a conversation personally with God and sharing it together. And we're all managing ourselves. Here's how I interpreted that. Um, on the next call, I want to talk about that a little bit more because it is helpful to break down meaning making. And what I mean is the ocean means a million things, and it doesn't mean anything. It's just an ocean. You just heard Anne Marie have all kinds of meaning come from thinking about the ocean on her own and then thinking about it just for a second, aware of the presence of God. Same with John. Our minds are meaning-making machines, and that is beautiful, and that's complex, and that is destructive, and that's derailing. It's all kinds of things. But there's a process that we can kind of look at together that just helps us create order to it. So I'm excited in the future to continue this conversation around hearing God, but even more than that, just around how do we manage our minds? What is mental management? Mindset is such a huge deal and it's a buzzword right now, but it's so important. I know when I was growing up, nobody taught me anything about mental management. I I didn't know my mind was a tool and an organ to steward. I thought it just ran my life. And so I think it's a really big conversation that we can have together. So you guys, thank you. Love you both, and I'll see you next time.
Love
See ya.
y'all. See ya.